Good morning, guys, and welcome to another video. Today, this What I Eat in a Day is going to be specifically dedicated to a very important nutrient, vitamin D. Since I tend not to eat fortified foods, most of my vitamin D comes from the sun. And of course, because it's always something. I was able to go to the beach last week, but not this week, because we thought the hurricane was done. We thought that 3 days of the most rain ever in Hilo was enough, but apparently it's not. So just as a point of reference, this is how I usually get my vitamin D. It's lovely. And I will be spending today eating the delicious whole plant foods, which are all important cofactors for vitamin D utilization in our amazing, beautiful, synergistic bodies. This won't work. Welcome to Studio Prius. This is not how I envisioned this video being filmed, but hey, we make do with what we have, don't we? Yes, we do. So as we talk about vitamin D, what I think is most important to remember is that vitamin D supplements are officially a $2 billion industry. So there are some major incentives to shaping the narrative of this discussion. Just like there were incentives to shape the narrative around taking vitamin A supplements and vitamin E supplements, vitamin C supplements, beta-carotene supplements, and all the other supplements that we have been told to take over the years, and then later come to realize that the supplemental form of that really important nutrient doesn't work and actually increases disease. So as we're talking about vitamin D today and kind of weighing both sides of the vitamin D argument, I think it serves us to think about who profits and who suffers when it comes to isolated nutrient supplements. Now that that is out of the way, what is vitamin D? Interestingly, what vitamin D is dependent on where you live. If you live in a part of the world where you get adequate UVB exposure on a regular basis, then vitamin D is a hormone. Your body makes it all by itself in response to UVB sunlight exposure. Those UVB rays hit your skin, and cholesterol in your skin produces 7-dehydrocholesterol, which is then converted into cholecalciferol, or vitamin D3. From there, the vitamin D3 is taken to your liver, where your liver converts it into 25-hydroxyvitamin D. 25-hydroxyvitamin D is the inactive form of vitamin D that floats around your body, and that is the vitamin D measurement that is measured in lab tests. So that inactive 25-hydroxyvitamin D is then taken to your kidneys, and your kidneys convert it into 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D, and that is the active form, and that active form floats all around your body, and that is the form of vitamin D that does all of the important work, like increasing calcium absorption from the intestines. Vitamin D plays important roles in fertility and immunity and hormone balance and even insulin regulation. Interestingly, it appears vitamin D also affects the gene expression of over 2,000 genes, and it may even affect the length of our telomeres. So unquestionably, vitamin D is extremely important for the overall health and balance of our bodies. And so for the vast majority of human history, and really just the history of life on this planet, organisms, including humans, got their vitamin D from the sun. Which brings us to the populations of people who perhaps don't get enough sun, or who can no longer synthesize enough vitamin D from the sun, or who live at extreme northern or southern latitudes. For those people, vitamin D could actually be a vitamin, which means that we have to take it in through our diet to get sufficient amounts. The last fact about vitamin D that I think is really important to remember as we move forward in this discussion is that vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, which means that our bodies can't get rid of it very easily, and it stores up in our fat tissue. Which brings us to the question of how much vitamin D is optimal. As we start this discussion, I just want to point out that there are two different ways of measuring vitamin D in the body, and they're kind of used interchangeably throughout scientific literature, which can make it kind of confusing for just average people like you or me reading research to understand what it's saying, okay? So vitamin D is either measured in nanomoles per liter or nanograms per milliliter. Those are two different ways of measuring the vitamin D. However, the measurements of vitamin D in the body are all done through blood test, and they are not reflective of the stored levels of vitamin D in the body unless there is a tissue biopsy done. I promise you all the random details are going to come together. Bear with me. I also think it's important to point out that in the scientific literature on vitamin D levels, there is deficiency. And in the case of deficiency, you end up with issues like rickets or bone softening or significant issues with your teeth or gums or immunity. The vast majority of people do not have that. Beyond deficiency, we're talking about what's optimal. And the research on vitamin D is correlative, meaning that there are correlations between vitamin D levels and certain disease risk or all-cause mortality risk, the risk of dying from anything other than an accident. So there's a correlation. It's associated, but there's not causation, which brings us to the $2 billion question. Do low vitamin D levels cause diseases, or do diseases cause low vitamin D levels? Is low vitamin D like the canary in the coal mine that's just alerting us that there's something out of balance in the body? That something's just not quite right? And at this point in the history of humanity, I think I can say with utter confidence that something is not quite right. So if that's the case, and low vitamin D doesn't necessarily directly cause disease, but is in fact a biomarker or a symptom of disease, then dousing ourselves with vitamin D supplements is like a really crappy Band-Aid, and it's not going to fix the underlying problem. But back to the argument about what's optimal. Those scientific studies that have found close correlation between vitamin D levels and all-cause mortality found that the beginning of the vitamin D sweet spot is at about 75 nanomoles per liter, which equates to about 30 nanograms per milliliter. Dr. Greger has put together a really fantastic series on vitamin D. I will link it down below. In that series, he also cites another study that found that healthy people in their natural environment who weren't supplementing with vitamin D, in this case I believe it was indigenous people in Africa, so near the equator, had a vitamin D level of about 115 nanomoles per liter. Quite high levels from sunshine, achievable. So based on that research, Dr. Greger indicates that about 75 nanomoles per liter is ideal. That equates again to about 30 nanograms per milliliter. However, there are several other plant-based doctors who I also really respect who recommend something slightly different. Most notably is Dr. Pam Popper, who I had the absolute privilege of studying with at the Wellness Forum Institute, and I really highly respect her opinion and her capacity to form really well-educated opinions about subjects after reviewing a lot of literature. Dr. Pam Popper also has patient practice, so she is actively seeing patients all day, every day, and working with them to change their health. That said, Dr. Popper recommends not getting your vitamin D levels tested. She also maintains that 20 nanograms per milliliter is perfectly fine, and that the diagnosis of vitamin D insufficiency in people with less than 30 nanograms per milliliter is a completely made-up disease. And it's a disease that really benefits supplement makers and the labs and doctors that run the vitamin D tests. And so she thinks that widespread vitamin D supplementation is a big problem because, one, it may not be of benefit and it actually may do harm, and two, people use it as a band-aid and they get distracted from the lifestyle changes that they really do need to make to improve their health and instead just pop a pill once a day. I think she's also really wise in noting that the blood test levels of vitamin D are not reflective of stored vitamin D, because vitamin D is a fat-soluble hormone. It gets stored in our body fat. And in one of her videos, Dr. Popper cites a study where people were taking 3,000 international units of vitamin D per day. And they did that for 1 year. After the 1 year period of time, their blood markers were taken and they were within a normal range. And then tissue biopsies were taken and they found a 500% increase in the amount of vitamin D that was stored in their fat tissues. And the fact is that we don't know what happens to that. We don't know because these levels of vitamin D would never occur from the vitamin D that we naturally produce from UVB rays. And what's going to happen after however many years of people supplementing with these fat-soluble vitamins? We have no idea. We have no idea. It's all postulations and speculations at this point because we have to wait for people to do it long enough. Concerningly, there are some people like naturopaths and biohackers who go beyond the recommendations that are found in the research, and instead they recommend that people consume even higher amounts of vitamin D and get their blood levels even higher, even up as far as 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter. Some people have even been recommended to take up to 10,000 international units of vitamin D per day, which is just absolutely astronomical and can definitely result in toxicity. And now it's pouring again. Sustenance break. Check this out. So last night, Levi and I, we indulged on whole plant foods. I made my banana oat cookies, or the oaties, the recipe that I made when my dad was visiting here. And then I made a big batch of chocolate and carob banana ice cream. It was ridiculously good, but there weren't any leftovers, except for this single oat cookie, which did have a beautiful caramelized banana, which I think somebody nibbled in the middle of the night. Not me. So I'm going to have my last oat cookie with a big bowl of cut up bananas, papaya, a little apple. I have some grapes and then pumpkin seed and flax seed up on top. Just in time for more rain. And vitamin D toxicity, as with most fat-soluble vitamins, is a real thing. You can end up having issues with hypercalcemia or having too much calcium in your blood. You can end up with soft tissue calcifications. That happens most commonly in the arteries and can end up leading to heart disease and kidney disease. In addition, you increase your risk of kidney stones. And one study cited by Dr. Popper found that people who took calcium supplements with vitamin D supplements had an increased occurrence of precancerous colon polyps. So this isn't a choice that comes without risk, and if someone claims that it is, I kind of feel like they're probably selling you something. But some people do need to supplement. Who are those people? If you have rickets, you need to supplement. If you have chronically low vitamin D levels, so under 10 or possibly even under 20 nanograms per milliliter, and those levels will not increase with responsible sun exposure, then you might be a person who has a genetic polymorphism that affects one or more genes that deals with the conversion of vitamin D into its active form. If you are really, really good about avoiding the sun on purpose or just because that's your lifestyle, if you're always indoors, if you live at a really northern or southern latitude, if you're a person who cannot go out in the sun ever for even 2 minutes because you'll burn, or if you have just a genuinely horrible diet that you refuse to clean up, if you have just chronically poor health from chronic diseases, or if you're elderly. All of those types of people would probably be well served by looking into taking a vitamin D3 supplement. But there is another option, and I don't think it's fair to discount that option since we know so little about the long-term effects of supplementation, especially at the higher doses that we have been supplementing with over the last 5 or 10 years. And so in this case, I'm going to use a little wisdom, which is of course a blend of knowledge and experience to make the appropriate choice for me. I know that there are a lot of people who disagree, but I personally believe that there is such a thing as safe and really beneficial sun exposure. Natural sunlight is a potent mood regulator, balances the circadian rhythm, it helps to balance melatonin secretion, it is a hormetic stress, which means that it's just bad enough for us that our body has a healing rebound reaction, and to be perfectly honest, it just feels good. I don't want to live a life where I can't go out in the sunshine sometimes. Sunbathing, heliotherapy, it makes me feel so good. But I do it responsibly, and this is how that happens. So in order to get the correct UV radiation to produce vitamin D, those are UVB rays, don't forget, you have to get that midday sun, which I do my best to avoid if I'm going to be out for prolonged periods of time, which is perfect because in order to produce vitamin D, someone of my skin complexion, in my location, so I'm a white girl near the equator, when I go out in one of my teeny tiny little slinky bikinis, staying out in the sun for 5 to 10 minutes will give me the equivalent of 1,000 international units of vitamin D. That is much less time than it takes for me to even think about getting sunburned. If you have more melanin in your skin, that is a natural sunscreen, and it'll take longer for your body to make enough vitamin D. After I get that 5 to 10 minutes of midday direct sunlight on my whole body, then I go inside or I cover up and I go in the shade. Generally speaking, if I'm gonna be out in the sun, I also keep my face covered. So I have a visor that I wear, and then I do feel like there's something to be said for getting direct sunlight into your eyes, like not looking into the sun, but just getting sunshine from the surrounding area into your eyeballs for hormone regulation and the like. And I did once hear some rumors that if your eyes pick up on the UV radiation, it will trigger your skin to produce more endogenous antioxidants to protect from the radiation. And if we put on sunglasses, that doesn't happen, but that is not a scientifically proven thing that I have seen. That was just a raw foodist rumor. So anyway, most of the time I wear sunglasses to protect myself from developing cataracts later in life. I also try to make a mindful choice that when I go out into the sun, I'm not squeaky clean. I have my natural skin oils all over me. I don't slather myself in coconut oil. I use my natural skin oils to expose myself to the sun. So the reaction of our natural skin oils to UVB radiation is the first step in vitamin D synthesis. So I go out dirty, and then I do my best to stay dirty for as long as I can, because as soon as you take a shower, especially if it's a shower with soap, you rinse off the vast majority of your vitamin D potential. After you've been out in the midday sun for your 5 to 10 minutes or however long you need, you can continue synthesizing vitamin D in your skin for, I've heard, up to 12 hours. The other factor that I consider when I think about safe and beneficial sun exposure is diet. One of my all-time favorite research papers that Dr. Greger reported on was that when we consume chlorophyll from like dark leafy greens from plants, and it's in our bloodstream, and then our blood is exposed to UV rays from the sun, so sunshine, it actually triggers our body to create CoQ10, which is a potent antioxidant. The other thing I do is I eat a ton of really beta-carotene rich foods. You will be happy to know that dark leafy greens are some of the most beta-carotene rich foods ever, along with orange and yellow foods like papaya, sweet potatoes, yellow peppers, carrots, etc. And I don't know if I have to say this, I certainly hope that I don't have to say this, but tanning beds are horrible. Don't do it. I didn't have to say that, did I? We know. We know. And since vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, your body will take what it makes from the sun and store it away in your fat tissues. And most of the time that can be enough to, say, get you through the winter. So that most of the time levels stay consistent in people, even at more northern latitudes. Of course, not everyone can or wants to use the sun to get their vitamin D, and so there are supplements. And I also think that there is a safe way to supplement. First of all, there are a few different forms of vitamin D. Vitamin D2 is what's found in yeast and mushrooms and most fortified foods. Vitamin D3, generally speaking, comes from animal products, be that fish or sheep's wool, lanolin. It's gross. However, there are some lichen-based vitamin D3 supplements on the market now that are vegan. I don't take them, but I've done some research and I will link below the vitamin D3 supplement that I would take if I were supplementing. And if you guys know of a better product, let me know in the comments section. So in Dr. Greger's videos, from the research that he was citing, they found that supplementing with 1,000 international units, or IUs, of vitamin D per day is adequate for 50% of the population to get them up to that 30 nanograms per milliliter level. That research found that 2,000 IUs per day of vitamin D is enough to get 85% of the population above that level. Now, if I had a confirmed chronically low level of vitamin D, and if I wasn't able to or didn't want to use the sun to get my vitamin D, then what I would do for a vitamin D supplement would be to take 1,000 to 2,000 international units per day for a period of time until my levels came back up or came to the level where I wanted them. After that, I would stop supplementing because it's a fat-soluble vitamin and it will have built up in my fat tissues. After that, I would probably opt to take vitamin D periodically. So like for 2 months at a time, twice a year, so that I would be getting new vitamin D, it would be storing up in my fat tissues, then my body would be able to use that stored vitamin D so that I wouldn't end up with too much of the stuff stored, because we don't know what happens with that. Does that make sense? I certainly frickin' hope so. Here we have dinner. So I made a big green salad with romaine lettuce and red cabbage, and I dressed that with the black tahini, a little bit of blackstrap molasses, red miso paste, and some of the savory spice mix from the How Not to Die cookbook. And then I put a little bit of dulse flakes like right there for me to get my iodine for the day. And then I have some black beans, Okinawan purple sweet potato, and then your regular orange sweet potato, which is very high in beta carotene, which is super protective when you go out into the sunshine. I also have some collard greens in the back here. I'm probably going to like smush all of this together and then wrap it up in the collard greens and eat that just to get some extra greens into my system. And then earlier, my FedEx delivery man came by and dropped me off a new bottle of my B12 spray. So I took one of those. Now I think pretty much all of my micronutrients are taken care of for the day. It's Levi. All right, you guys, so that is what I eat in a day. Ironically, I didn't get any sunshine time today to help me out with my vitamin D, but luckily it's a fat-soluble vitamin, so it stores up in my fat and I have plenty. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, learned heaps. If you have any more questions, feel free to comment those down below. This next week, I do have to go to the mainland on family business. So I can't make any guarantees about videos as far as content subject or whether or not I will be able to do any good filming, but my intention is to do a video on staying vegan, whole plant foods, and healthy as possible whilst traveling and in stressful situations. So that's my intention. I will see what I can do, and as always, until next time, make better choices for yourself. No one's gonna do it for you, and take really, really good care. I'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!
My couch is squishy.
I have to get my old lady lumbar support. I went to all that trouble to clip up my hair and now you can't even see it. Jesus! Adequate. Oh, it actually doesn't look that good anyway.